Instead, he couldn't play his oboe for a few months because he had such severe tendonitis. And since I had never had tendonitis, I didn't really know how to help him. I'd barely even heard of that before and really had no idea how to help her get through that. So I felt a little bit of the imposter syndrome as a university professor. And here were students in need, and I really didn't know what to do for them. The oboe is an instrument that a lot of people kind of, when they're first handed the instrument, they're told, oh, this is one of the most difficult instruments you can play. They were sweating and grunting and stuff like this. So that was part of the culture, right? It's the most difficult instrument. It's supposed to look difficult. But I happened to see a couple of oboe players out there who made it look like child's play. They made it look really easy. And I just realized if I wanted to have a long career, I'd rather be one of those people that it felt easy for than one of those people that it felt difficult. Part of the problem with university curriculum in music, as you know, as a music student, as anyone who's gone through a music program knows, there are already a lot of requirements. And yet, unfortunately, somehow they forgot that maintaining a healthy mental and physical self is probably the most important thing you need in order to be a musician and really sustain a long career as a musician. So it hasn't been part of the traditional curriculum, unfortunately, and it was a challenge to get it to be part of a program. So there are a variety of places, conservatories and university programs, Michigan State University, many others that have been doing this, but it really needs to be in every curriculum.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's guest is someone I've been looking forward to interviewing for quite some time now. In June of this year, I was asked to give a presentation to high school students at a music camp at BYU and on mindset and injury prevention and those types of topics. And in preparation for that, I came across an article on the University of Nevada, Las Vegas's website, on their School of Music website. And it was titled The Healthy Musician. Of course, that piqued my interest, and I read it and came across this name down at the bottom and just knew I needed to talk to him. And I emailed him that day asking just to set up a call with him just to kind of pick his brain about stuff. And he is one of the go-to guys in the world of injury prevention, body mapping, and oboe, everything, I guess. And he is very highly regarded in his field. One of my professors at BYU plays with him in is it called the Las Vegas Symphony now?
Las Vegas Philharmonic.
Las Vegas Philharmonic. I know it's gone through some different titles, but so I've had a couple of people that have highly recommended him to me. And so without further ado, Dr. Stephen Caplan, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
It's a great time that we have here on the show, and we go pretty deep on certain topics. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts, especially one of the things I forgot to mention is that one of the things that Dr. Caplan does at UNLV is that he teaches courses on musicians' health. And that was the first time, I know that's not the only place in the world that does that in the higher education sphere, but it was the first time I had come across that. And so I was really excited to pick his brain. And another unique thing about him, at least for this show, is that he is one of our guests that has not gone through an injury personally, but he has helped several people prevent injuries and overcome them as well. And so, Dr. Caplan, just to start off, why did you, not having gone through an injury, what got you so interested in body mapping and musician health in general?
There were two things that really got me down this path. One is I had more than a couple of students who experienced injuries. Very talented young oboe player who got a full ride to go to Interlochen, a high school student, and was so excited, and I was so excited for him, and he did really great. And they have competitive auditions there, and he got in one of the top groups and all this kind of stuff. And within a couple of weeks, he was getting severe tendonitis. And when he comes back from the camp, I was hoping, to be at this much higher level and stuff because of that experience. Instead, he couldn't play his oboe for a few months because he had such severe tendonitis. And since I had never had tendonitis, I didn't really know how to help him. And I had a different student who came to me. We had lockjaw, TMJ issues. And the same thing, I'd barely even heard of that before and really had no idea how to help her get through that. So I felt a little bit of the imposter syndrome as a university professor, and here were students in need, and I really didn't know what to do for them. But another equally important reason and more selfish reason was that I just wanted to make playing easier for myself. The oboe is an instrument that a lot of people kind of, when they're first handed the instrument, they're told, oh, this is one of the most difficult instruments you can play. And we're always told, that it's really hard to play and stuff like that. So I think because of that, a lot of us get comfortable with having it feel hard. Even once it gets where it's at a point where it sounds pretty good, it still feels difficult. And that's where I was as a professional player. I was playing at a very high level, but it didn't feel easy. And it didn't bug me at first because I saw so many other great oboe players who didn't look comfortable when they played. They were sweating and grunting and stuff like this. So that was part of the culture, right? It's the most difficult instrument. It's supposed to look difficult. But I happened to see a couple of oboe players out there who made it look like child's play. They made it look really easy. And I just realized if I wanted to have a long career, I'd rather be one of those people that it felt easy for than one of those people that it felt difficult. So I had been on a journey for a little while already to try to find ways to make it easier for myself as a performer. And I worked many different things, mostly through Alexander technique. And I was very lucky to have some really fantastic teachers in the Alexander technique field. However, I was living in Las Vegas and working there, and there was nobody in the entire state of Nevada that was a licensed Alexander teacher. But I would have these occasional chances to work with people. Either I'd bring them into Las Vegas to do work with our students, and then I'd get a little lesson on the side. Or else if I was in another city somewhere where there was a teacher, I'd seek that help there. And so one of these people I worked with introduced me to body mapping because I was expressing my frustration that when I worked with an Alexander teacher, everything felt a lot better. But as soon as I got away from the teacher, I couldn't recapture that. And so he literally just gave me this book by Barbara Conable called What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body. And he said I should hold on to it and read it. And I was really impressed reading that book. And I ended up from there actually going up to Portland, Oregon, where Barbara was living at the time, doing a workshop with her, taking a lesson, and the rest is history, basically. I really felt like this was the answer on both fronts, both to help me personally, to make my own playing more easy, and to answer many of those lingering questions in the back of my mind about how should breathing really work and stuff like that, but also to give me the skills and the vocabulary to help my students when they encountered problems as well. Barbara Conable was an incredible mentor, and I know you've had some other people that you've interviewed on this podcast who worked with her, and I hope they've praised her to the skies as well, because she's an amazing person, and she put together a course specifically for musicians, even though she herself is not a musician. She can't even read music. But she had worked with enough musicians that she got a very clear understanding of what musicians needed. And so she put together this course, What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body, and started the whole body mapping movement. And I became one of the early people that kind of joined the movement, got licensed by Barbara, and started spreading the word. And from there, of course, she also mentored several of us to put into words, to get published, more specific books that described how we were applying body mapping principles to what we do as musicians. So Lee Pearson was one of the first to write one of those books for body mapping for flutist. Then Tom Mark wrote one for pianist. And so I also wrote one of those first books, my oboe motions book for oboe players. And it's been out for a while now, and it seems to have helped a lot of people, and that makes me really happy.
Yeah, it's great. We were talking about this a couple weeks ago on another call, just the how it's kind of becoming this not emerging because it's been around for a while, but that more and more people are starting to put more content out about it. And therefore, I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't David Vining one of the people who's written one on brass playing?
Correct. He has what every trombonist needs to know about the body. And David has gone on, he's now based in Flagstaff, Arizona. He's on the faculty at Northern Arizona University. He started his own publishing company. So he publishes many books that are aimed to help musicians, including my second book, which he just helped me put out a new edition of, a breathing book for oboe players. He has a whole series of breathing books that people have done. Breathing for voice, breathing for horn, breathing for trombone, and my breathing for oboe players. So yeah, he's a real force as well. And David and I trained about the same time with Barbara Conable. That's when I first got to know him.
I want to transition to your work at UNLV, specifically with these courses that you teach. Because one of the things that I realized with my injury was that there at least, and I'm not trying to disparage any program, but there just weren't a lot of resources for built into academia or built into, I guess, degree programs, whatever you want to call them,
right?
To address musicians' health and all the things that go into keeping musician healthy and what things lead to injury. What was that process like to pitch that to your faculty, to your administration, and then what have been the shifts and changes and benefits you've seen because of that?
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. And part of the problem with university curriculum in music, as you know, as a music student, as anyone who's gone through a music program knows, there are already a lot of requirements. They want us to be able to do sight singing. They want us to understand historical, stylistic things. There are just so many requirements already that we need to have in order to be a great musician. And yet, unfortunately, somehow they forgot that maintaining a healthy mental and physical self is probably the most important thing you need in order to be a musician and really sustain a long career as a musician. So it hasn't been part of the traditional curriculum, unfortunately, and it was a challenge to get it to be a part of a program. It has been a challenge for me and many of my colleagues around the world who have done this, but there are now many programs around the world. Many people are able to just get a workshop, a once a month kind of class, or once a semester class or something like that. At least they're doing that though. That in itself is a thing. But there are a few of us who have created semester-long courses, and many places are offering things like this. San Francisco Conservatory, Oberlin, I think Cleveland Institute now is offering a course. So there are a variety of places, conservatories and university programs, Michigan State University, many others that have been doing this, but it really needs to be in every curriculum. So I was actually lucky when I did my body mapping training with Barbara Conable. I had been on the faculty here a little more than 10 years at that point, but there were other more senior faculty members who had more clout than I did. And fortunately, one of them who had spent time as a chair of our department and she was a very senior, respected member of the faculty in our vocal area, she had seen a workshop with Barbara Conable at the National Teaching, NATS convention, National Association of Teachers of Singing conference, and she was just completely blown away by Barbara. So when she heard I was actually working personally with Barbara, getting licensed by her, she was really my biggest cheerleader. And she was the one that went to the chair and said, Stephen's doing this. You've got to support him. You've got to help him. And she made sure when I offered my first class that all of her students were in my class. I had more vocal students than instrumental students in that very first class I taught. So that was really lucky and very helpful and got me off to a good start. The first courses I did here were just pretty much a clone of what Barbara was offering, a body mapping course. Since then, as I started tweaking things and developing it as something that I wanted to be more permanently in the curriculum, I broadened it a little to include other areas. So I spend a lot of time on performance anxiety issues. I spend time with hearing health because that's so important for people to understand and address. So there are a variety of other topics that we do, but the core of the class still is helping people to understand their body and have a better understanding about how the physical and how the physical side of music making works with the mental side of music making to get us to a healthier place. So it has developed over time. Generally, the response has been really positive. The students are very grateful. And what I did, again, over a long, because I've been teaching the course now for 20 years. This will be my 20th year teaching it. I've developed it actually into two things. I have an undergraduate version of the course, which is now required for all of our undergraduate performance majors as a pedagogy requirement for them. And I'm one of the few, we have one of the few curriculums in the country where we now actually require it for students. So I'm really proud of that. I also have a graduate level course. So every semester I alternate. I have the graduate level course in the fall, the undergraduate level in the spring. The graduate level course has a research component that's annotated bibliography that they do related to their particular area. So that's a nice addition to it as well. So yeah, it's been great. And the other thing that's happened is at first I did this just to help people understand what this was all about, because the word body mapping doesn't mean much to people and actually gives people very weird ideas about what it might be. So I offered to do clinics on a regular basis in the different, each area has their own repertoire class here at UNLV, studio class, whatever it's called, at other places. So I just said, if you want me to come out, I can do a certain number of a semester. So I worked with the cellist, I worked with the violinist, I worked with percussionist, and I would do these little studio classes to give them a taste where their students actually played for me, and I tried to help them understand how a better understanding of how we move and how we use our body could help them with their mallet technique or whatever it is, or guitar technique. And so that really helped that I had other faculty that they invited me. They were able to see what I was doing and understand it better, and therefore encourage their students to take my class as well. So and that continues. So the thing that's been really cool lately that happened is that I have students now who want to get more of this. I have gotten to a certain level with the body mapping organization where I'm one of just 6 people, I think. There are just 6 or 7 of us who actually do the final training of anybody who wants to get licensed to teach body mapping. So I'm working with people from all over the world to help them get licensed as a body mapping educator. And so my students here realize that I do that, and many of them have gotten excited about what they've learned in the 1 semester course, and they want to go farther with it. So I have about half a dozen students now that I've been working with for the past year on like post body mapping stuff, body mapping 2.0 kind of stuff. And several of them are getting close to where they're going to be licensed soon. And that's really exciting that they will be able to carry on the mantle for me, because one day I'm going to retire from all of this, and I want the word to get out there.
Absolutely. And wow, 20 years already. That's so great, because I feel like, in the research that I've been doing, there's been research done in this field over the last, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years.
Sure.
But it seems to be really coming into this subject really starts coming into the limelight in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. I don't know. And it seems to only come into light for people once they get injured, which is not a great starting place. Hopefully,
it's not, but at the same time, the injury rates are so high for musicians that eventually we're going to have a lot of people coming to this.
Right. And I was just about to reference a study I actually just read yesterday that I think came out 3 years ago. It was during the pandemic in the UK, where a couple of things they found. It was all surrounding musicians' health, especially they were studying a school, a higher education institution in Leeds, England, and in Lucerne, Switzerland. I might be getting that detail wrong, but just comparing the health habits, the psychological habits, and all these things that led to different outcomes for these students. And I think the statistic, I have it right here. The statistic was over 50% of the students play with discomfort almost on a daily basis. And then I think of those 51%, it was 34 that actually do play. Like they notated that they do play on a daily basis with pain. Yeah. And so it's a crazy statistic. And that's in, those are in schools that do have those programs. I did a little bit of digging. They do have those programs. And in other places, I've seen statistics that are as high as 90%.
Exactly. Yeah, there have been many studies of professional musicians and amateur musicians and student musicians, and generally the percentages hover somewhere from 70 to 80%, something like that. Will say they've at least experienced injury in the past, right, or they're currently playing in pain. And Barbara Conable always said the thing that's so sad about that is that the reality is the percent should be zero. There is no reason that playing an instrument or singing should injure anybody. And the only reason it's happened is because we do have a culture that has unfortunately neglected helping people understand the physical side of playing in an honest, accurate sort of way. So I was saying kind of facetiously that eventually, because so many musicians are injured, they're going to eventually all come around to this stuff. But we're actually trying to do something a little more proactive with the Body Mapping Organization, our Association for Body Mapping Education. We're going to start hopefully this fall, very soon, actually within the next month, maybe, a new licensure specifically aimed more for music educators, because we really want this information to get to people right when they start first learning to sing or play an instrument, not something that they come to after they've already developed a lot of bad habits and then they have to unlearn all those habits. Yeah, that happens to so many people. And even though, you were saying I hadn't yet experienced an injury, I probably would have eventually if I stayed on the path I was on. So in order to make music much easier for myself and more efficient, and I have done that through body mapping, I had to do a lot of unlearning as well. And I still am. I'm still working on it. And I've been doing it for over 20 years. So wouldn't it have been great if I had started out with these concepts, and because I've been playing for almost 50 years now. Anyway, we are hoping to get this to more and more people. I love having music educators in my courses here at UNLV, especially my graduate level course. I specifically have it later in the day so that people who are working like part-time on getting extra degree credits, they're already in the public schools teaching. I have many of them that come to my class because it's offered at 4:30 when they can come. And they're super excited about this information. And it's exciting for me too, because the stuff that I'm teaching, like the very next day, they go and start doing with their students. And then the next week they come back and say, hey, this was great. This kid in my middle school band, all of a sudden the light bulb went off because of something we talked about in this class. And so it really is exciting how finding a way to talk about movement and the way the whole body can support music making, can really be exciting for even a very young musician.
Absolutely. These aren't like higher level thinking. Well, they are, but like to the point where it's out of reach of young musicians. One of the people I interviewed on this last season, her research, she just actually, I think, just got licensed as a body mapping educator. Her research for her doctorate was injury prevention pedagogy for beginning string musicians or beginning viola musicians.
Was that Noelle?
That was Noelle.
Noelle.
That was Noelle.
Yeah, I trained Noelle.
Oh, she's in Nevada too. Yeah.
That's right.
She's
yeah,
great.
but we still did it through Zoom because she's up in Reno, which is very far from Las Vegas.
Very far from
But
Las
she
Vegas.
is terrific. Her dissertation was outstanding, and she is actually on the committee that's putting together this new licensure geared towards music educators and private instructors. Yeah.
That's so great. I want to read something real quick. I don't know. This probably has your handwriting all over it. It's on UNLV's website, but you talked about the culture, and along with this body mapping licensure that you're working on, I think that this statement that you have on the School of Music website is just so indicative of the work that you're doing and the culture that you're trying to create or foster at UNLV. It's titled "Introduction to Health Issues for Musicians." I see it as almost like a mission statement for your School of Music. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how it kind of read for me, and I think it's awesome. But it says that the School of Music has an obligation to inform students and faculty of health and safety issues, hazards, and procedures inherent in practice, performance, teaching, and listening, both in general and as applicable to their specific specializations. It goes on to say that it is important to note that health and safety depend largely on personal decisions made by informed individuals. UNLV has health and safety responsibilities, but fulfillment of these responsibilities cannot and will not ensure any individual's safety. Each individual is personally responsible for avoiding risk and preventing injuries to themselves before, during, and after study or employment in the UNLV School of Music. And one of the things that I also read in this study was that these students believed that their institutions had at least a 20% role in their well-being, in the role of their well-being. And I think it really, like your statement there, and maybe you can talk about like how that came to be, but that statement really reflects that. Is like, we do have a role as an institution to educate and to inform and train, but at the end of the day, it's the onus is on the musician to take care of themselves.
Exactly.
So if you want to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, that statement is related to something else you could find eventually on our website, the College of Fine Arts. We actually have a health and safety guidelines for the entire College of Fine Arts, which includes not only the School of Music, but School of Architecture and Art and Theater and Dance. It's a very large school. And so what I did shortly after starting the coursework that we were talking about earlier, there were other faculty members I saw in our college that were doing things like I was doing, and that I felt passionately about trying to educate people in a more holistic way. We had a voice teacher who's a certified yoga instructor who had written a book on voice and yoga. We have a dance instructor who's very involved in a healthy approach to dance and movement. Theater instructor also who's written a book about movement for actors and created his own course based on his personal work with Feldenkrais and Alexander technique. So I decided, initially I wanted to put together also people from our kinesiology school and physical therapy and things like this. But as soon as I started approaching those people outside of our college, they looked at me with these quizzical looks like, musicians get injured? What are you talking about? They just had no concept. So I realized I first needed to just work on our own college and get things in order there, and then maybe eventually we could branch out and make it bigger. So I started this Consortium for Health and Injury Prevention, we call it CHIP, and it's this group of like-minded faculty members within the College of Fine Arts, and we just got together and talked about how can we get the word out, how can we add coursework if necessary, do workshops, whatever. And at first it really was just putting together some workshops for our students and for the community, and they were very successful, and we did some really good work that way. But one of the other things we wanted to do was to get buy-in from the entire College of Fine Arts on what are considered adequate safety and health procedures related, as I was saying earlier, to hearing health as well as physical health. The environment, the work environment that we work in, making sure that we have a certain standard that we try to set so it is healthy for our faculty and students. It was over a 2-year process to get that passed, because academia is very slow. And faculties, like our all college meeting only happens once a semester. So I first got together and presented this to all the chairs of the college in like a private special meeting, and they thought it was a good idea, but then we had to wait for the next all college meeting so we could present something to the college and brainstorm it, and then it was another year before we could have another all college meeting to take the notes from the so it was a very long process, but eventually we had something in writing. There was feedback, questions, surveys and stuff, and we came up with these health and safety guidelines, which now are published on the website, and I think it's from that actually the School of Music thing that you're reading, the language in there actually is derived more from those general guidelines we did for the whole college. But it is something that, fortunately, I have a dean here, for the dean of our College of Fine Arts, who just happens to have a background in music, which is nice. But she's also a very progressive thinker, and she is very much in agreement with the idea that this should be infusing our curriculum more, and that we need to make all of our, not only our students, but the whole community of Las Vegas aware of this. We are the entertainment capital of the world.
Absolutely.
At least, so that's what we're called and known as. So it's our job as a university at the center of that entertainment capital to help people understand what it takes to have a healthy career in any of the arts.
Absolutely. That's so cool. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, like we were talking off camera, was this chip thing, because I'd seen it one of your videos on your YouTube channel, and I just was really, really curious about it.
So what happened beyond this initial thing then, where we did workshop symposiums and put together health and safety guidelines, is eventually different people on the committee were running into other people, and people were finding out we were doing things. So I got random emails or calls from people in physical therapy, people in psychology, and people from our med school. We have a relatively new med school here, so I had many meetings with the assistant dean of the med school and with the person in charge of wellness at the med school and so forth. So we eventually got people on board outside of the College of Fine Arts as part of this CHIP group. And then the most amazing thing that's happened, that only has happened in the past 3 years, is something I had dreamed about almost from the beginning 20 years ago. But I did put a solid proposal together and presented it about 15 years ago, and it was immediately rejected. But I didn't give up. And finally, like I said, 3 years ago, we now have a dedicated space here in our building, one of our music buildings, and it's for anyone in the College of Fine Arts. We have the Department of Physical Therapy and myself running it together. It's a free clinic for any student in the College of Fine Arts. So if they just have questions about anything, but especially if they're experiencing some sort of pain or injury, they can come in for free, get an evaluation, get follow-up work from trained physical therapist and emerging young graduate student physical therapist. So it's a way of training our physical therapy students to understand more than sports therapy, which in the past has traditionally been all they learned. So they're starting to learn what arts physical therapy is about, performing arts physical therapy is all about, which is great for their education. But for us in the College of Fine Arts, it's amazing because our students have this free resource available to them. It's open 3 days a week. And it's been, like I said, a dream of mine for a while, and it's continuing to grow. One of the School of Architecture members of our CHIP group has now applied for a grant. I mean, it's a pie in the sky thing. We'll see if it happens. But we're trying to get grant money to upgrade the facility itself and use it as a model for spas and clinics all through Las Vegas, to understand that in addition to providing outstanding care in the form of education and physical therapy, the actual physical space contributes to how a student understands that information and how they integrate that information into their own being. And so if it's a calming space, if the colors or, the kind of feng shui of the space actually makes a difference. So we're working on getting grant money to upgrade the look and the type of equipment we have in the space. And the idea behind it is that this is actually a research study being done through our School of Hotel Management and our School of Architecture, to actually use this as a testing site so that when people come in, they can fill out a little survey and talk about if certain factors were influential in helping them with their recovery. And we want this to be a model, like I said, for all kinds of places all over Las Vegas and throughout the country, maybe. Again, it's a pie in the sky thing, but that's how things happen, is you have to have the dream.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I have wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. You gotta have the dream. Man, that's higher education in action. That is so, so cool. Man, that's just got me thinking about so many cool things, especially in a place that I love so much like Las Vegas. It's so many musicians out there, and it's got such a vital need for something like that.
Yes.
I mean, where else would it be that much needed? Maybe in New York or something. Hopefully something like that happens in New York too.
Yeah.
I want to kind of pivot to kind of one of the topics that I was telling you about off camera that seems to be talked about a little bit, but not as much, but in the realm of injury recovery and injury prevention. And that's the topic of mindset that causes injury, that prevents injury. I was listening in preparation for this interview to an interview you had done on a Double Read podcast. I'm blanking on the name, but shout out to those guys. It was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. And you had said in kind of the impetus for your journey, learning about body mapping and all these things, that you had noticed that you had, oboe playing was hard to do, like you were saying, and that's kind of what caused you to seek this ease of playing, right? And first of all, I want to just acknowledge that, because at least in my experience with me, I thought that trumpet was a workout. It was supposed to be a workout. I was supposed to be exhausted and sweating and all this stuff. And it took an injury for me to learn that it's not. And so I feel that's the way that most musicians, or if not just a lot of them, learn about this new, not even new, but just this more evolved way of pedagogy or of living as a musician. And so what part of your outlook on your playing career did you have about your playing career that helped you to kind of go look for help and seek out that help before it became like, I need to go because I can't play anymore? And then conversely, what type of mindset or outlook do people have on their career, students that you see in your classes have on their careers, that may lead them to push themselves to the brink of injury?
Yeah. Well, I think we're all very much influenced by the culture we see around us, and it's just part of the American spirit, work ethic, to take it to the limit and work as hard as you can to make it to the top. And of course, there's that whole no pain, no gain kind of attitude. That, I mean, obviously you do want to work hard, and it is hard work to be an excellent musician. There's no doubt about that. But this idea that all it takes is more and more hours of practice and sweating and straining, and really that it's okay to feel pain because that's going to make it, that means you're working hard enough, that has no place in music training whatsoever. So it is a big shift to go from that mentality that I have to just do everything in my power and, work so hard. And it's not a good practice session unless I do sweat at the end of the practice. What was interesting is before I got into the body mapping thing, I practiced for a couple of hours, and I always felt more worn out at the end of the practice session because I had sweat a lot, and I had put a lot of hard work. And again, I didn't even think about it. That's what practicing is. But I was really tired at the end of a couple of hours. After going through the body mapping training and shifting the way I approach things in the practice room, it was pretty normal that at the end of the 2 hours, I was actually more energized than I was at the beginning.
Imagine that.
I wasn't worn out at all. I was excited and could keep going if I wanted, there is a big shift in attitude, I think, just very basically in the practice room. Like I said, my work had always been just to play as beautifully as possible and with the most incredible technique. I wanted to be a really great oboe player. So all that mattered was that I was playing accurately, rhythmic accuracy, beautiful tone, emotional, those kinds of things. And the fact that it was hard to do that, it's supposed to be hard. Of course it's hard. And it didn't, I achieved a lot, but it was still hard for me. And I was okay with that because like you're saying, we have this culture that says it's hard work to do anything. So that's okay. What I've done that's different now is it's equally important to me not just to play the notes right, not just to be emotional and play it with a beautiful sound, but if I haven't learned to make it easy, I haven't mastered it yet. My work is not finished if I can just play the notes right and play it beautifully. That isn't enough, because when I think about the people that I admire the most, not just on oboe, but singers and, James Galway, the great flutist, Yo-Yo Ma, a great cellist, they make it look so easy. They have a twinkle in their eye. They look like they're actually having fun when they're playing, So I realized the only way I was going to get to the point where it looked easy when I was playing and it looked like it was fun for me was if I made it a priority in the practice room to find a way to make it easy and fun. And that needed to be just as much of a priority as playing this technically difficult thing and getting all the fingerings right and getting the high note out and stuff like that. Until I had found out a way to get the high note out with beauty, but also with ease, it wasn't mastered. It had to also be with ease. So no matter how hard the piece was, and I have played what's generally considered like the most difficult repertoire you can possibly play on my instrument, like I said, my goal now is to try to play it and make it feel and sound easy. I don't always achieve it, but that's my goal. And that has taken me to a much different place than I was before. My endurance is much better. My consistency is much better. I'm able to do things now as far as faster tonguing and faster fingerings and things like that I never could do before, because I've taken that I've had that mental shift in my approach to what I actually do in the practice room.
Man, if you needed a commercial for this how this stuff works and if it's really worth it, I think that was it right there. It is so worth it from a technical standpoint, even to do this work, to do these mental shifts, to learn about the body, to do all of these things so that you can become a better musician. It's not just become a more informed like knowledge thing, but it's to get a better output as a musician.
Yeah. And
that's,
so people,
you put it so beautifully.
When I worked with Barbara Conable, people saw me as like her little pet student. She did really like working with me because I was one of the few students that came to her that hadn't been injured. And I really came there because I did just want to make it easier. And she had been saying for years, that's the whole point of this stuff, is to make people better musicians. It also happens to help them avoid injury or learn to overcome injury. But the biggest thing really is that it will make them a better musician. And so that's the laboratory we were working from right from the beginning. And that's why the work I've done here in my classes is so accepted by the students, because the students bring their instrument to class and I hear them play and we work on making them a better player. I'm not interested in them memorizing a bunch of anatomical terms just for the sake of doing that. The whole point of it is to find a way to make them better. And that means every semester is different because I have a different group of students in there and they have different needs and they're learning from each other and I'm learning from them. And we're putting on little detective caps to figure out how we can help each one of them become the best musician they can become and become better in that one semester with a lot of different strategies.
Totally. When you do, I know that I have a lot of educators, both public and collegiate educators that teach a myriad of students, whether it be private or in group settings. When you do have students that kind of come in with that mindset of no pain, no gain, I got to just grind it out. I got to be in the practice room until 11 o'clock at night. I was definitely one of those students for a time. What type of things have you seen that have helped you help your students to kind of ease into that more healthy mindset or more healthy way of looking at their progress as a musician?
Yeah. So the mental stress that we create for ourselves with that mindset often will translate into physical stress as well.
Absolutely.
So the player, because they're so determined to get better, their shoulders get hunched or their neck gets strained or they tighten their jaw a little bit too much. And so that's why it's so important to have these people play for me, and we can immediately find what's this triggering thing for that person. Because for each, for one person, it's lifting the shoulder. For another, it's tightening the jaw, But when I see that tension coming into their playing or singing, and we're able to work on finding a way to free that area up, whatever area it is, the player immediately feels and hears the difference. And then they want more of that. And that's how you get them hooked.
How's that for instant gratification, right?
Exactly.
My generation's drug.
Yes. So that's why it's so important to have that real, honest experience with people. But then comes the hard part, because those habits don't want to die away easily. And I think it's Taylor Swift that says old habits die screaming. That's a new one I've heard. And it's very true. The old habits don't want to go away. So you understand intellectually, oh yeah, it's a lot simpler to do that without clenching my jaw or without raising my shoulders up. But your body, when you're in the heat of battle and you're in the middle of playing that really difficult passage or whatever it is that you're doing, your body immediately goes back to its safe place, the place it's used to being in, which was that place of stress because of your early training. So it takes a lot of work to unlearn those habits, a lot of work away from the instrument. It's observing yourself doing simple things like walking down the street or brushing your teeth, and noticing how often you clench your teeth, maybe when you're starting to brush your teeth or whatever it is. How do those things affect you in your daily life? And as you start just noticing that, then you can start undoing that and just taking a little. All it takes is a second to just say, stop. I'm not going to do what my body is used to doing and wants to do. I'm just going to hang and just observe and allow and see if I can find freedom, and then try to work from there. And the more you do that on a regular basis, the more you get into the right mindset, the mindset that's going to help you find efficiency and freedom in your playing. That's what we need. We need efficiency and freedom. And unfortunately, people instead are trying to work on strength and endurance and things like that. It's really about freedom and efficiency.
Yep. Totally. Those are two words that my teacher post-injury has really hammered home with me is efficiency and freedom. It's amazing how those types of things can bring us to our goals easier than our old way of thinking.
Yeah, there's also so much new brain research that's showing that old model, of feeling like you have to practice 6 hours a day. It just isn't as effective. There are many studies that are showing that if you take regular breaks every 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, that's going to be a huge game changer. There are many studies that are showing it's really much better just to practice consistently, maybe for a couple of hours, maybe an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the evening, something like that. But give your brain time to absorb it. Just getting a good night's sleep is going to help you more than practicing 6 hours straight. There's even a brand new study I saw very recently in the past month or so, showing that even if all you do is take regular little 10-second breaks, so you have a little breakthrough, and instead of immediately going back and just playing it, I got it right, let me play it again. No, take 10 seconds to let your brain and body absorb what just happened and kind of visualize it again. And then after that little break, go back and do it. And they've proven that taking that little 10-second break and then doing a little visualization before you return to it is going to mean that that the brain, like the little neurons, kind of connect a little more efficiently, and you're going to actually retain the skill more quickly than if you just keep pounding away at it, repeating it over and over again. So,
I saw that study too.
Yeah,
I saw the study too. It's. I think I saw the number was 20 to 25 times more effective than just doing another physical repetition.
Yeah,
it's incredible. And that's how, like, before we started recording, that mind and body is just connected. There's no separation. Right. You can't have the mind without the body, Yeah. And you can't have the body without the mind. Yeah, it's just so important to have that awareness and that curiosity of what are these habits that I've had before? And it's pretty obvious, like, once, like, somebody who's trained, or even if we're just trying to be more aware of our own habits, which ones are serving us and which ones aren't. Usually if there's tension involved, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's usually probably not going to be as helpful of a habit.
There's good tension and bad tension, basically.
Right.
I mean, there has to be some tension in order for muscles to contract, and we do need them to contract to do certain skills. So it's just that efficiency, again, figuring out what the amount of contraction is that's helpful, and when we've gone beyond that point. So I was also very lucky being here at UNLV, besides the many great things that happened in Las Vegas that I've been lucky to be a part of over the years. But we had a professor who only just retired last year, but in our kinesiology department, we have a Professor Gabrielle Wolf, who's known internationally for her research into motor skills. She started working mostly with athletes. She was interested in skiers and golfers and things like that. But she has done dozens and dozens, hundreds of studies trying to understand the best way for high-level athletes to learn skills and to recreate the appropriate skills in a performance situation so that they don't choke. And her, like I said, she's internationally recognized, one of the top scholars. So I just invited her for coffee to talk about how this can relate to what I was doing, how it relates to music. She had done some work with dancers and musicians in the past that I had already read, but I was very intrigued about, because one of the biggest things she's done is talk about having external focus and how important that is. And when it comes to performing, golfers get the yips at the last minute, they choke, and a lot of times it's because instead of just thinking of the trajectory of the ball or the overall feeling they want to have with their body or the way the swing should feel, they get hung up on thinking about, oh, my wrist needs to do this right now, or my shoulder should be doing this, my knee needs to do. So when they focus on the body, they tend to choke. And that's the crux of her research. And so here I am teaching all these music students. I'm preaching literally, you've got to find out more about your body. You've got to understand your body better. But her research is saying, oh, no, don't think about the body. And of course, I've run into many musicians who don't want to hear about the body because they've been told paralysis by analysis leads to paralysis, that kind of idea that if you think about the body, it's going to choke. And so I've had some really fantastic discussions with her, and I really respect her research. And so I've been applying that to the way I teach, and that's been a new level. I mean, Barbara Conable was already getting at this, but I think blending it with the research that Gabby has done has been really helpful for all of us in the body mapping world and for all of us doing this kind of work, whether it's Alexander teacher, yoga instructors, and whatever. Her research is really influencing a lot of us. But basically, the idea is there is a place for learning about the body. It's definitely needed. There's no way an athlete can learn skills if they don't understand how their body works. It's just once they figure that out, they need to get out of their head about that and work towards finding an external focus that's going to get them to perform in the best way. For musicians, the simplest external focus is the sound itself. We're very lucky we have something. It's harder for dancers maybe to know exactly what they should be focusing on, or for an athlete, again, do they focus on the ball? Do they focus on the overall trajectory of the swing? You know, there are a lot of different things that could be an external focus. But with musicians, the simplest thing is the sound itself. And so once you understand the body and how the body can efficiently produce the sound you want, then you link that sound with the efficient movement, and then all you have to do is think about having a beautiful sound. Or maybe an angry, whatever the music calls for. It might call for an angry sound, a dirty sound, a happy sound, whatever it is. But the sound motivates your body to do what it needs to do because you figured out, you understand how the body works efficiently. But you have to have that understanding first, and that's just as important as figuring out fingerings and learning your scales and stuff. So I just don't accept people musicians who tell me I don't want to learn anything about the body because I'm going to choke. You just have to know the place to do it. I've written a whole couple of articles about this actually, and given the talks at national conferences about it. But there's a way to practice to treat the practice room as a laboratory where you experiment with movement things. And again, I do a lot of experimenting away from the instrument as well, to just understand how one part of the body helps another part of the body to work freely. But then once that's figured out, you need to also have a separate set of practice skills that are practicing for performance. And you have to develop a set of external focuses. It might be sound, it could be something else though. There are a lot of things that can serve as your external focus. And so you have to figure out what works best for you for the particular piece you're doing. And you have to practice that on a regular basis for many weeks before the performance. And then you'll be successful at performing. And you'll no longer be thinking about the body. When you're in the heat of the moment in the performance, you want to just be communicating the music to your audience. You want that sacred space of that beautiful exchange that happens between an audience member and a performer.
Absolutely.
That magical thing. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be thinking about your jaw or your wrist or something. If you start getting in trouble, if you hear something's a little off, then maybe for a second you do have to think about the body, but then you immediately get back to thinking about what you're trying to communicate to your audience. And that's a very essential skill, but it's a skill that takes a lot of work, just like so many other skills, like ear training and everything else. We can do it, though, as musicians. We learn how to be multitaskers as musicians right from the beginning. You have to watch the conductor and watch the music and pay attention to your instrument. So we're trained to do that right from the beginning. So it's just opening up your awareness to the whole spectrum, yourself, your whole body, and the audience and the music.
Absolutely. That, just thinking about the whole analysis process and the body, what I found is that it's all foundational, right? You can't have a house without a foundation, but once the house is built, you're not thinking about the foundation usually. Right. I mean, I don't know. I've never built a house, but I do enjoy the fruits of a foundation from a house. It's all just, we have to lay that foundation in order for us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And that deals with learning about the body, that deals with navigating the culture, that deals with how you perceive your progress. Once you have all those things, and as you're developing all those things, because it's a lifelong process, right? That's when you're able to really, like you said, build that connection and grow that connection between you and your audience and you and your instrument and you and your teacher, all these things.
Yeah.
But it takes that foundation to really...
Absolutely. And then you have the confidence that you can tackle whatever it is you want. You have the confidence that you have something inside you that's worth sharing with an audience.
Absolutely.
And you have the confidence to have fun doing it.
Yeah.
So what could be better?
Totally. Well, Dr. Caplan, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I would be very in the wrong if I did not pick your brain about an oboe thing or two specifically, especially since there are public educators who are teaching young oboe students who listen to this show and are thinking, I'm a trumpet player. I don't know how to play. I took 2 weeks of oboe. Yeah. What are some common misconceptions about oboe playing that lead to overuse injuries that could even manifest in the first beginning weeks, and what can educators implement to prevent those things?
Yeah, well, the best thing you can do is try to get the student with a private teacher, or at least even an older student that understands the instrument right away. The other thing is the oboe really isn't any more difficult than any other instrument. There are two obstacles, though. You have to have a functional reed. That's getting easier these days than it used to be. It used to be really hard to get a decent sounding reed. I'm saying used to, back when I was first starting, there were like 2 brands of reeds you can buy in a music store, and they were both really crappy. So, but now there are all kinds of people with reed businesses and stuff, and you can actually get decent reeds at a lot of different levels. The second thing is you've got to have a functional instrument. And this is the one thing about the oboe. It's got so many little keys and screws on it and stuff. Just one slight turn of one of those screws can totally mess up the whole instrument. And the student all of a sudden thinks, oh, I'm terrible. I can't do anything because they can't get anything out on the low register, when it has nothing to do with them at all. You just need to get a screwdriver and turn that screw. So if they can have a good repair person, so that the instruments in good repair that the student's using have a good source for reeds, then learning the oboe is just like any other instrument. You learn the fingerings, you learn how to blow, and you have fun.
Simple. It's the little things, right?
Yeah.
So
the other thing I think is having a really good conception from the beginning of what a good sound on the oboe should sound like. And it's so easy again now to find video recordings and stuff like that online. Yeah. But give the student a really good conception of what a tone should sound like, and that goes a long way. Again, we have to have a conception here in order for it to actually become reality. It's got to be you've got to be mentally in check with that and understanding that completely in order to achieve it eventually. So you want to have them saturated with sounds, just like I'm sure you as a trumpet player were told, these are the great trumpet players, listen to some of them, and you got turned on right away by a couple in particular probably that you thought sounded really amazing, and you just want to listen to them over and over. So any young student should do that. And again, when I was young, it was really hard to find a recording of an oboe player, but it's not hard at all now. There are a lot of great recordings that are easily accessible. So that's another really good thing.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's that actually was one of the biggest pivotal moments for me, was when my dad, in this case, was the one who shared with me a list of trumpet players. And, even to this day, I had a friend of mine just text me the other day and said, hey, this recording of Clark Terry reminds me of your playing. And I was like, whoa, my name's Clark, but I don't play that good. Yeah. But it was a recording that I had listened to when I first started playing. And it was interesting for me to see how influential that had been for me without even realizing it.
That's right.
So, well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Caplan. It's just, it's been so informative for me personally to see what you're doing over at UNLV and the work you're doing with body mapping. I hadn't heard of body mapping for me personally before I started this podcast, and it's just so important. I ask a couple of questions before we sign off on every interview, and the first one is it's actually a kind of a newer question. What has been the biggest takeaway for you since you started this journey with injury prevention and body mapping and all of this?
The biggest takeaway probably is just that most people don't understand how the whole body contributes to movement and to music making. I think even that most basic thing, that music is movement. Most people have never thought about that before, but there's no other way you can make music, whether you're a singer or an instrumentalist. You have to move something. Even the most basic thing about music, a vibration, is a movement, right? And yet people tend to not think, musicians don't think of themselves as movers, but we're movers just as much as athletes are. We move in a more, I don't want to say sophisticated, but it's sort of a more intricate, we don't have the gross motor movements, they're more small motor movements, but still we're moving in order to create music. And so just like athletes have learned that unless they have trainers to really train them how to move, they're not going to get to the next level, we as musicians have to start accepting that too. We need movement coaches. And that's what I've become. I'm a movement coach as well as a musician. And I'm trying to help train other music coaches. Yeah. Movement and music coaches.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. The second and final question I want to ask you, I started this podcast because of a podcast that I had heard. A trumpet player had interviewed somebody who had gone through injury. And then I reached out to that musician who had gone through an injury, and he's been instrumental in my recovery. And so if somebody were to come up to you and say that they had been listening to this podcast, to trust the process with Clark, and they were going through an injury, regardless of what instrument they are, they play, what would be one thing that you would tell them as a piece of advice?
To listen to their own body and really try to be as honest as possible in their assessment of their current musical ability and where they want to go next. And if don't listen to somebody else telling them there isn't a problem if they really think there is a problem inside of themselves. You're the only person that really knows you. And that's the beautiful thing that I learned and admired. I learned from Barbara, but I also admired about her, is that she wasn't there to tell people how to recover, what they needed to do. She was there to help them figure out what they needed. It was detective work that she couldn't do without the students' help and understanding. She needed to get in their head, literally, and have them really be honest about what they were experiencing and how they were experiencing it. And then she was able to help them. So that would be my advice. And then also I still recommend, I have it here, what every musician needs to know about the body book. This is a general one, but there are those specific books like David Vining's book for trombonists, mine for oboist, and there are many of them out there now. A beautiful book for singers. They're just, in the past few months, one came out for clarinet players that's outstanding. Oh, cool. So there are many instrument-specific ones there now, what every fill in the blank needs to know about the body, or body mapping for clarinetist to flutist, whatever. So look at those, read them. Like I said, I've been really surprised how many people have told me just by reading a chapter in my book, it really kept them from giving up the instrument. They were ready to literally give up a career, but because of the information I had in my book, they figured out a way that they could get back to playing again and be healthy. One of them I just saw at this double read conference. She was one of the people that had that experience. And she's playing magnificently now and has been for about 12 years since she first read my book. So, yeah, it can be a very powerful thing.
Absolutely. Man, this has just been so enlightening for me. And I know educators out there and individual musicians are just so grateful for your expertise and your time today. So thank you so much for chatting. And to everyone out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Keep on keeping on, and keep trusting the process. Hey, before you go, we need your help with something real quick. Somewhere out there's a musician who is going through an injury or just a tough time. There may even be an educator with a student in that situation that they don't know how to help. We need your help in getting this message to them. Would you do them the favor of sharing this episode on your socials and with your friends? Also, cliche that it may have become, leaving a rating and a review actually does help people find us, not just boost our ego. So would you take a quick second and leave us a review so that musician can find us more easily? If you want to reach out to me personally, I would love to hear from you. Just look for the send us a text message button in the show notes of the episode. You can do that on any episode on your chosen podcast platform except YouTube. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I want to extend another heartfelt thanks to my team, without which this podcast would not be able to happen. Thanks to Daniel Baldwin, our audio engineer, Kevin West, our music and sound effects coordinator, and Dana Lovell, our promotional materials coordinator. So to all of you out there in podcast land, keep on keeping on and trust the process.